from our studios in Tampa and Los Angeles. This week, this is Green Tagged Theme Park in 30, where we cover the top theme park news of from each week and kind of ask questions, discuss why it's important. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Scott Swenson of Scott Swenson Career Development. And just a reminder, we have been doing the show for over 4 years, which we kind of forgot about. But
yeah, we have to remind everybody else because we completely forgot, is basically what Philip's trying to say. But we said we would have celebrated our 4-year anniversary, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? Something like that?
I think September 6th was around there. Yeah.
So happy anniversary, Philip.
I know, it's great. I can't believe it. This is the longest commitment I had, and I'm just kidding. Well, or maybe not.
Well, actually, it is. But
this is my longest committed relationship.
Yep, pretty much is.
Here we go.
But I think the reason it's gone on for so long is because we're never in the same state or sometimes country. So we just get together and ramble and people listen. So that's great.
Well, in celebration of that, we have opened a Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/greentagged. We have 4 bonus episodes already there. It's $4 a month, basically. It's $3.99, but $4 a month. And you get access to a Patreon chat where you can put in topics you might want us to discuss. And then you can also get bonus content. We're going to be recording usually a bonus episode weekly, roughly, depending on our schedules. But it's a lot of, so if you want a lot of extra, much more unhinged content, it's patreon.com/greentagged. It gets you a dedicated RSS feed, so you can actually just add that bonus feed to your regular podcast player. So it's not like you have to be in Patreon to listen. You can add that bonus feed to all your other podcast players and listen to us in whatever platform you would like to.
So it's basically Green Tagged Unhinged. I like that.
Yes.
I think that works.
I should have called it that. I call it Green Tag Pro, which is probably the wrong name.
Yeah, because we're significantly less professional once we get... Yeah, just so you guys who are listening, just so you know, basically what happens is after each recording, what we'll do is we'll be like, wait, what didn't we say or what couldn't we say in the show? So for whatever reason, whether it was professional or just we didn't have time for it or, we will, even if we, for example, the few times that we disagree and see things differently, that argument goes into unhinged. I'm sorry, it goes into pro. Yeah, I'm going to call it unhinged from now on. Sorry. It's, that goes into that kind of content. Or even we'll say things like, this doesn't really fit within the show, but it's something I think would fit in the bonus content. So let's go ahead and do that. But, obviously, if you look at the structure of it, it's not going to, we're not going to end up quitting our jobs because of the Patreon account. So it's just, think of it like a tip jar. If over the last 4 years, you've gotten some good information from us and you'd like to continue to hear us ramble and continue to support us in what we do and support our bad behavior, it would be a great opportunity to go to Patreon and add this extra bonus content. Because like I said, it's sort of like getting an extra show a week. And depending on where we go, what we do, there may be some other opportunities to throw in some bonus content in there as well. So we'll just kind of see where that all heads. So if you can join us, thanks. That'd be great.
On to the show now. I thought we'd start off this week with some trip reports because those seem to be doing pretty well. So might as well continue. And it's Halloween. So, it's kind of what we do. So this past weekend, I went to the opening weekend of Dark Nights at Hershey Park, and I went to the opening weekend of Field of Screams in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So Dark Nights at Hershey Park, it opened on Friday the 13th, which was the early for that show.
Mm-hmm.
They have 5 haunted houses this year. They opened a new haunted house called The State of Evil, and they also rearranged some of the park to have what they're calling an Avenue of the Afterlife, which is basic. So basically, to give the big structure, 5 haunted houses, 3 scare zones. They do have a new kid show as well. And now what they're doing is they're basically clustering the haunts in one area, and then they're making the rest of the area like a scare-free zone. And this Avenue of the Afterlife is like a pathway that can lead you from it's a no scare pathway that can take you from one part of the place to the other. So it's possible to get through the entire event now without encountering a scare zone. So basically they've kind of divided it up. So these are the scare areas, these are non-scare areas. And the Avenue of the Afterlife is more like a party zone now. So there's a DJ, there's actually a scare actor meet and greet where they're not scaring you, you're taking photos and you can talk with them. There's like a little circus performers, and then there's all the food. So instead of having to go into the scare zone to get the tasting card food, now you can, like, they're all in the Avenue, so you can just go to the Avenue and get them there, or they're in a entryway or somewhere that's not scared. So it's not like it's still themed, right? But it's a more of a family, it's a kid friendly zone, I think, basically, instead of being scary. And of course, they have the slider show. They have a slider showcase this year as well in the evening, which is different. So they have like the slider show, but then afterwards, the sliders do meet and greets and they take pictures with people and do that whole thing. So, and then A State of Evil. And A State of Evil, their new haunted house, think of it kind of like Haunted Mansion, where you're going to Haunted Mansion. In essence, the idea is you're going in to tour an estate that is for sale, but of course it's haunted. And as you go in the initial hallway, you see all the portraits of the previous owners, and you watch through the decades, so you can actually see the portraits, like, get more modern as you go through the decades. And it turns out that each previous owner obviously died in the house, and each one had a different deadly sin that they kind of led to their death. So as you go through the house, each room is like haunted by that. So you can see the different decades in each room, and you can see the different deadly sins in each room. So it's not gory like they did with Ante Mortem's Abattoir last year. So to me, I actually feel like this event is finished. Keep in mind, also, it's all included in your ticket. There's no extra fee.
This is the perfect way to handle a non-separate ticketed event. It's this is something that this idea of clustering all the scary stuff in one space. This is something that SeaWorld San Antonio did many years ago before they decided to really go all out. And they used to separate it. Originally, they separated it by time of day, and then they separated it by location. And now they're just spooky yuki all the time. But I think that if you're doing it as a mix-in, I think this makes perfect sense, because that way you're not having to communicate to people that this is not our daytime brand. This is both. And I also think it encourages people to come. Now is Hershey's a seasonal park, is it not?
Yes, it is relatively seasonal. So they're not open like the entire time.
Yeah, they're seasonal. They're seasonal like Williamsburg, like Busch Gardens Williamsburg is seasonal.
Yeah.
In the fact that, so they need this little extra punch right before they close, and or go to significantly reduced hours. And so it's obviously working for them as a mix-in. But it sounds to me, now I've not visited, but it sounds to me like they actually have enough content that they could do it as a separate ticketed event if they chose to. But but this sounds like a perfect opportunity to terrify those who want to be terrified, and to play the more playful fantasy side for families that don't.
I do think that that's the thing that. So I think, taking a step back and looking at this event, I think this is a pretty, dare I say, like, perfect event. Like, I think it's really well done, and it to me, it represents a little bit where theme parks are going to be going in some fashion, because the value add here for season pass holders is tremendous. And then it leads right into Christmas, which again is also not separately ticketed. So, and I do know that the season pass holders visit an average of 2 to 3 times the Halloween event. So I think that's pretty good. And basically then you have the tasting pass, which is $30 for 5 items, and so I think it's great, because for their market, which is families up to, like, young teenagers, like up to 16 would be kind of like, I think the top end of that. So I think it's perfect, because it is truly where the younger siblings could hang out in the Avenue of the Afterlife. The older ones could go get in line for a haunted house, then come back and meet them. They can get food. They can do the rides. They get the whole package really there. It's all included. And to your point about this, I do think that, and this is the key, I think this is where I think other parks kind of mess up or they can't justify it or whatever. Like the Dark Nights event is good enough that it could be a separately ticketed event. Like it stands on its own. It doesn't need the rest of the park. And that is the key because 500 houses is a lot and 3 scare zones is a lot. And when you get in the thick of the season, I know those lines can get up to, an hour per house when you get it really into the really heavy times, which is just like every other house, every other park, right? So essentially that's like 5 hours just right there, plus the scare zones and the slider show, and they're also testing out a show in one of their scare zones that hasn't been, really fully released yet. That's a full event that you could charge a ticket for, but that's why to me it works because you can include it, but it can stand alone on its own. And these are good houses. I mean, they're well-designed houses built by Adirondack. They have story, they have progression, they have good acting. I mean, they're not, we might talk about this in the bonus show, but they're not like what Six Flags is putting up and trying to call a haunted house. These are not like 2x4s painted black, period, right? Which is kind of what we're seeing at Six Flags. Like these are like real fabricated houses with effects and lighting. And the people say that, talking to the guests realize how good they are. People say they're beautiful, they're great. And what I love hearing is I love the parents saying, those are great houses. I don't need to stand in line for 60 minutes. I'm going to sit over here and get a drink and watch this thing, but I'm going to let the kids go do it. And I'm like, that's exactly what they want.
Well, another thing for seasonal parks, too, that we have to take into consideration is seasonal parks, even though they don't necessarily do a separate ticketed event, it is in essence a separate ticketed event because it extends their season.
Yeah.
And, I know that like Busch Gardens Williamsburg, for example, when it first started doing Halloween, it would end, the park would go to weekends only and then close on October 31st. And that was before they started doing Howl-O-Scream. That was when they were just doing Trick or Treat in the games area. So even though it's not considered a separate ticketed event, it kind of acts like a separate ticketed event because it is an extension of their season. It's extra days that they're adding into their season that are viable and that are as viable as a day in the middle of the summer. So I think that's one thing that's important to recognize, that even though for a seasonal park, it's not a day ticket and a night ticket, it is in essence a full price admission. Now the nice thing is with Hershey, it is included in the season pass, but it is an extra ticket in and of itself because it's really extending. It's a justification to extend the season, and it's certainly a justification to bring people back who've enjoyed the park over the summer. So to your point, Philip, I think it is a very good model for a seasonal park, and I have heard nothing but positive reviews. So I'm glad to hear that your feeling is the same.
Yep. It definitely, I think so far has been one of my favorite events. If you want to see more about it, I do have a video that kind of goes through the entire thing. So I don't know if hopefully I'll remember to put that in the show notes, but otherwise you could just go on YouTube and look for it. So I also went to Field of Screams, and to me, this ecosystem is pretty perfect. So Field of Screams is pretty clearly where the teenagers go once they don't want to hang out with their family anymore, or where the teenagers go when like they go to Hershey maybe with their family or do whatever with their larger group of friends or however they want to do that, and then they go to Field of Screams really just like with their friend group that's older. That's how, and I see this as a great ecosystem. I think this whole thing works really well. I only visited Field of Screams, but of course, Scott, I know there are a lot of other haunts in the area, so I'm not trying to say those are not good. It's just I only went to Field of Screams, but there's Jason's Woods, there's Eastern State Penitentiary. There's so many great places in that area that I think serve the same niche where they serve to fill that older crowd. And Field of Screams is excellent. It's always on point. They've been doing this for 32 years, their 32nd year, and you have the 300 houses and the hayride, and actors can touch you there, and they do, not in a bad way, obviously, but they do it in a creepy, scary way. keeping mindful of the touch points, mainly shoulders and neck type of things, and ankles. So, it's done really well, but it is definitely a very intense experience, especially when you look at, comparing it to Hershey. And I think but they do a great job as well of having their midway. So this year they added a themed bar. I think it's called the Chainsaw Bar, but it's cute. So they're trying to make it where there's like an area where you have like 21 and over, right? Which is in this bar area for those people to hang out without kids or screaming, and just kind of drink and hang out. And then you have the midway with the food trucks, which is where, you get the carnival games and the food trucks, and they have a stage where a live band is playing on weekends. So you got that whole thing. And then you have the hayride and the haunts. So I think, again, it's also a very well-balanced event. And this is, I think, where I'm thinking the trend more in my mind is like, to me, that's a little bit better than Horror Nights in a sense, because it's what, $40. So it's the price is so much less and the value is the same, right? The level of detail in the sets, one could argue it's even better, because I know that Nocturnal Wasteland, has a same with Universal. Universal's like, we have a full plane and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, so does Nocturnal Wasteland. I don't know how they got it there, but there is a full-size plane, in that haunt. And it takes, whereas Universal Mazes average like 4 minutes walking time, that one takes like 12, right? So it is, I think this is where you start to see independent attractions really shine, is where they can offer these things that actually the parks in many dimensions cannot compete with. They cannot compete with having that amount of space that they build on for 30 years, right? And now that these independent attractions are adding stuff like the 21 and over bar to really flesh out their offerings, it's a fantastic evening. I think that we'll begin to see this more and more from independent attractions.
Yeah, there's always been that trade-off. The independent attraction is operating in basically a different hierarchical structure. So there are certain things that they can get done more quickly, but they can't afford the IPs. And let me rephrase that: they can't afford to do the IPs legally. So it doesn't mean they don't do it, but they can't afford to do the intellectual properties legally, and that really draws people in right away. I think the interesting thing, just hopping back, talking about the ecosystem as a whole, with Hershey, one of the things that theme parks have gone through, especially theme parks up north and especially seasonal parks, is the challenge of maintaining a safe environment during their Halloween events. The approach that most of them have taken is to try to make certain that they can entice families, and it's not just a place for teens and older to go and raise hell. And so I think that is something that it sounds like Hershey is honing in on. The other side, the other approach, and you briefly talked about it with when you're talking about Field of Screams, is to do a 21 and up haunt, which I've done in Florida. But I think there is certainly a market for that as well. I think there's the as we are seeing with the expansion of Halloween events, not just in age demographic, but also in runtime, starting earlier and earlier and going later and later, basically butting into Christmas. The appeal of Halloween and dark fantasy is growing. And I think it's certainly something that everybody who's listening should, if you're not doing something that is Halloween related, find something that you are comfortable with, that either complements or is in opposition to your day brand, and see how you can either expand your demographic or expand your operating time.
Yep. Okay. Enough of that. Let's talk about some headlines now. Speaking of IPs, so Butterbeer is making its way into CityWalk in Orlando. The Universal CityWalk shopping and dining district in Orlando will expand its flagship Universal Studios store in 2025 with wings devoted entirely to Super Nintendo World and the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. In addition to merchandise, the expanded selection will also offer Butterbeer, marking the first time the signature beverage has been sold outside of a theme park at Universal Orlando. Seeing as CityWalk doesn't charge an admission fee, it's quite the perk for guests visiting CityWalk without theme park tickets. I don't know how I feel about this, actually, because it is really like a break in the story, where the whole idea originally when Harry Potter launched was, of course, that you could enter into the Wizarding World, and that's where you would get these exclusive beverages. But Epic is opening, so I'm sure that they want to do some stuff that is a draw, over to CityWalk away from the Epic area. But I don't know, does this irreparably damage the brand or not? What do you think,
Well,
Scott?
I mean, considering the fact that, you could, if you Google it, you can find the recipe for
Yeah.
butterbeer and you can make it at home. So there's that. But to me, when I first read this, I looked at it and I went, oh, this is a result of the drone show over at Disney Springs. So
Yeah.
basically what happened was with the drone show, with adding in essence, a free show, well, not in essence, it was, and adding a free signature event to the formerly only shopping area of Disney, reinvigorated everything. The restaurants showed higher than normal per caps. The stores showed higher than normal per caps. All you had to do is walk through Disney Springs while the drone show was running, and you realize people made it a specifically targeted location. I think that this, to me, is sort of Universal dipping their toe into the, here's something that it's still exclusive to us, it's still exclusive to Universal, but and it will hopefully draw more people, draw more attention, draw people over, as you say, from Epic. But I see what you're saying as far as the world building, the breaking down of the world building a little bit by putting it outside the actual Wizarding World. But I will tell you, whether it does or not, when you are drinking a butterbeer in Hogsmeade, it tastes different than when you're drinking a butterbeer in a retail location.
Right. That's what I was going to say. I agree. I'm not sure. I even think it could fit into the world building if they tried. I guess they didn't, or we don't know. I guess it hasn't opened. But, I could see where they could do it where it's like almost like back when they were doing like the underground alcohol type of stuff, where you're like, we're not supposed to be selling this butterbeer, but we smuggled it out for you. And like, here it is. You could do it in a world building way. But I think to your point, it's really just going to be about the fact that you're not doing it in the theme environment. And everyone knows that makes things taste better. We eat with our eyes.
Yeah. It's like when you eat at Broomsticks in Hogsmeade, your food tastes magical, and it's because of where you are. Now, granted, the quality is also really good, but it's the environment and the world building that really makes it something special.
Yep. So also, we heard more about the Wicked, the Experience, which is coming to Universal Studios Florida as well. So the same area, but inside the park. So this is actually inside of the Universal Studios Florida. It's in that space right as you walk in across from the morning cafe that's right there. So a Wicked themed experiences are opening at Universal theme parks on both coasts, all in celebration of the new Wicked film, which is in theaters November 22nd. At Universal Studios Florida in Orlando, Wicked the Experience will open in late October. The walkthrough attraction will feature costumes and props from the movies, as well as specialty merchandise and snacks. Wicked the Experience will replace the recently closed adjoining gift shops at the front of Universal Studios Florida, themed to Hello Kitty and Betty Boop. So we don't have, obviously, we're not know until they actually open what it looks like, but it sounds like it's going to be a pretty classic, almost like those touring exhibits that they did with Harry Potter or with some of the other things. I think, again, with the asterisk of depending on the execution when it actually opens, I think this is an incredible idea. I think this is an area I think Universal especially could expand into, and I'm really curious to see how it goes. I mean, we've seen the Tribute Store kind of grow into this year-round immersive walkthrough experience over the years. And we know, as in Scott and I, and all of you listening know, that themed retail is really picking up steam again because, like we just talked about, it's much, shopping in that environment, and that whole thing makes shopping more of an experience. And I think if Universal, essentially, this reminds me of what they do in Hollywood, right? When they open a new film in Hollywood, there's always, like, when It came out, they built the whole haunted house and it's free and they put it down there. They had the Nun experience. There's always these like pop-up experiences to push the movies that happen in Hollywood. But essentially, if it's Universal doing it, so Universal has the IP, and then Universal can build and manage its own IP, but they could put it in a theme park, where they don't need to essentially pay rent, right? They don't have to release the space or whatever. It's a controlled space. But they could still build an experience to push the movie. I think this could be a thing that could do really, really well, and really is something that, again, Universal is uniquely positioned. It's within the realm of expertise in every dimension. So I'm excited to see this and maybe future portions of this to really get back to what they're good at, which is pushing their movies.
Well, and once again, it's nothing new. The Universal has done pop-ups like this for previous films. Disney has done it. I actually refer to it as the Planet Hollywood approach. Only instead of doing music, they're doing film and the films that are coming out and promoting them. Because again, they have all the stuff. They've already paid for all the costumes. They've paid for all the props. Yes, they have to invest in a way to display them, but that's why it's always tied to culinary and merchandise. And the culinary and merchandise really is nothing usually. Now, again, we'll see how this one is executed, but usually the culinary and merchandise is nothing too far over the top. It's just, got Wicked on it, or something that is Wicked adjacent. And that way they can again encourage you to buy by world building, by taking you into the world of the film and giving you sort of a behind the scenes peek at what you're going to go see. So if you have not seen the film, it might encourage you to go and drop the bucks to see the movie. If you have seen the movie, you're definitely going to want to go see the experience so that you can see the behind the scenes. I think it works to promote both the parks and to promote the film. I doubt, I know I could be wrong, but I doubt that Wicked the film will have such a rabid fan base that it will drive attendance at the park. But if you're at the park, I think you'd definitely go and see it and perhaps pick up one of your favorite pieces of kitsch.
Agree.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and I think this kind of thing should continue. But again, it's kind of full circle. They've come back to it now. Because they used to do that. They used to do that in the studios tour all the time. There would be a pop-up section that was just for the new film that was coming out, the new hot product.
Okay, really quick. We do have a few extra minutes because we took a little time at the beginning, but our last story here is about the Disney Aspire program, and it looks like they are putting a funding cap on the Aspire program. So for those that don't know, the Aspire program benefit, which formerly provided 100% college tuition to eligible workers, they're now putting a funding cap on that. Disney cast members participating in the Aspire college tuition service will soon be subject to a $5,250 annual funding cap, and the change will take place November 27th of this year. The Aspire program formerly covered 100% of college tuition plus textbooks and fees over eligible workers at select universities. The Walt Disney Company employs over 90,000 workers worldwide, and the Aspire program launched in 2018, and by 2021, the program had already achieved its 5-year goal of investing $150 million into its cast members' education. By August 23, nearly 4,000 cast members had graduated college through the Aspire program. What the heck, Scott? What on earth? I mean, I don't know. I mean, my hot take is it's a terrible idea, especially now. It's a terrible idea because I know a lot of people who are really only doing Disney because of the Aspire program. But what's your take, Scott?
Well, to be on a positive note. It is a benefit that is not offered even at the cap. That's not offered by any other theme park.
Yeah.
So it's still above and beyond.
Dollywood.
You are correct. Sorry. Any other theme park? I think of any other theme park in Orlando or in the Florida market. Yep. Yes, Dollywood Hershey is amazing with that. They really kind of wrote the book on it. Literally, actually, there's a book out there. But so on the plus side, $5,200 annually for a college student to pay for whatever is not. It ain't chump change. I mean, it's still enough reason. And like in true Disney form, they will test how far financially they can go. Sometimes those tests fail, sometimes they succeed, but they always provide a great deal of data. So if they discover that by putting this cap on it, they lose, 50% of their college age cast members, then they may say, "Oh, well, that was a bad idea. We got to raise that back up." I think they're also looking at the fact that they're hoping that the trend for staffing is still equalizing and coming back from the COVID years, and they may not need this benefit in order to accomplish what it set out to do. I think it's a great benefit. I don't mean to belittle it in any way, shape, or form, but it is a benefit that is designed to serve a completely different purpose. It's not completely altruistic. It is to make sure that the staffing is filled, and I'm just hoping that they're right, that staffing is coming back, but I'm not really experiencing that. But we don't have time to talk about that because we are out of time. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue this conversation in what I'm still going to refer to as Green Tag Unhinged, also known as Green Tag Pro. And we will have this staffing discussion in our show, which we will record in just a few moments. But if you'd like to hear that, go to Patreon, find us, because you can join. But until next week, on behalf of Philip Hernandez and myself, Scott Swenson, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30, and we will see you next week.